My name is Aya Maeda. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at Monograph, and I'll be your host today. And if you were at AIA in San Diego 2 weeks ago, we really hope you were able to stop by our booth with our big bright LED truck because there was a lot of great energy there, and we were super excited to see everyone. And if you're joining fresh, no worries. You're about to get some exciting access to benchmarks that most firms in this industry have never had before. And so, first, let's do some quick housekeeping here. So, please drop any questions you have in the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your console on your screen. And if you can't find it, try clicking on the More button, which is the three dots, and you'll likely find it there. And we'll take all of your questions here at the end. Without further ado, here, I'm going to move along. So, a little context for those of you who may not know us. So, Monograph is the easy way to run a stronger A&E firm. We're a firm management platform that gives architecture and engineering firms one connected system to manage all of your projects, your teams, your billing, and your performance. And in fact, the industry benchmarks that we're sharing today comes directly from the firms that are on our platform, which is what makes them worth paying attention to. And yes, so without further ado, I do want to welcome Ashish Desai, who's our new CEO. So, Ashish, for people who don't know you, you were previously our Chief Product Officer for 3 years before transitioning into your role as CEO. So, would you mind giving us a quick intro there?
Yeah. So yeah, as I said, I've been here at Monograph now 3 years. Previous to that, I've done some version of this job a few different times where I lead the product org, which for those of you that are not as familiar with software, it's the teams that focus on identifying what the problems are for our customers and then helping prioritize and solving those problems, working along with our engineering team to develop the solutions. I've done that many years, and as I think a lot of you probably know, for the last 3 months, I've been the CEO. It's been a real pleasure to get even broader scope of in the organization and meeting even more of you in that capacity. And most importantly, I don't, this is not about me. I'm excited about sharing these results and all of these insights with you on how your peers are doing, because that's, I think I was about to talk about that, but that's what this is all about, figuring out how to help you learn from each other. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Excellent. All right. So before we get into the findings, I do want to establish something important because it's the context that makes all of this data matter. So even at AIA, I think we've heard from a lot of the A&E firms that they feel they are running their business without a lot of visibility and that they might have a rough sense of their overall revenue or how busy the team is. But many firms either don't track the time or have established metrics or just never bother to calculate them. So in turn, they don't know how that ladders up into the overall health of their firm and what levers are available to fix things. Ashish, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's, I'm not going to plug Monograph right now, maybe a little bit later, but
Maybe.
I think a big thing that we believe here at Monograph, regardless of what tools you're using, is it's really important for you to measure, because if you don't measure, you can't improve. And trying to understand what's going on with your data, where are your people spending their time? Well, how much are you earning on every project? Are they profitable? All those things are really important. And hopefully we can find ways to make that and give you some tips on how to make that all easy to track. But if you don't track it, then running on vibes is not an effective strategy. And I think that is really important. Hopefully the one thing you take away from this entire session is that you can't improve what you don't measure. And so that's probably step one. We'll get into that, I'm sure. But yeah, really excited to keep talking.
We're gonna have a t-shirt that says, "Don't run on vibes," right? That's next AIA. But yes, that's really the tension that this report is designed to resolve. Our report here is based on real operational data on over 2,200 firms who are currently Monograph users. And that means that it's also based on actual platform usage and non and self-reported or survey data, which tends to be prone to bias. So instead, we can actually tell you what is actually happening and what strong firm performance can really look like. Also, for the first time this year, we tracked AI usage and adoption as a distinct cohort. And so the findings there were significant enough that we figured it was worth highlighting in a report. So today, you'll see me refer to AI adopters as a separate cohort of firms where we detected AI usage versus those that we did not as baseline companies. Cool. Let's dig into the findings. Let's start with one of the simplest calculations that you'll see in our report, which is revenue per employee. So now here's the math. You can take your annual net revenue and then you can divide it by the number of full-time employees that you have. And in fact, you can calculate this for your own firm right now, so you can follow along with the rest of the conversation. The industry average that we found for baseline firms is $190,000. But what's interesting isn't the average, of course, it's how wide that range is. So top performing firms are coming in at $228,000 per person versus bottom performers are at $130,000. And so that's almost $100,000 difference, right? Roughly the size of one employee's full salary that's sitting on the table. Now, when we pulled out the firms that are actively spending on AI tools, like that you see shown here in the purple versus the baseline cohort in gray, this picture shifts again. So the top AI adopters are earning $120,000 more per employee than the weakest firms in the same AI group in the purple. And then when you compare AI top performers to their baseline equivalents in gray, they're generating about $20,000 more per employee. But here's the part that really stood out to us. In the baseline firms, your best performers earn more than your weakest ones, right? Duh, that's pretty expected. But in AI adopting firms, the same spread is twice as large. So the top firms on the green, they're not just doing a little better, they're actually pulling significantly further ahead from the bottom. And AI really isn't lifting all boats equally, right? It's accelerating the firms that are already winning. And to make it more concrete, I think you can put a dollar figure on that, right? So if you're a 10-person firm that's sitting at the top of that AI curve, you're generating over $410,000 more per year than a bottom performing firm of the same size. I'm going to pause there for a second because that was a lot of information to cover, and I'm going to throw it to Ashish. But yeah, what's your read on this? Why is the gap widening here?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And like you said, there's a lot of information we're sharing here. But ultimately, I think what this comes down to is the more you embrace technology to save you time, the better. And whether that's AI or something else, I think this is very consistent with what we've been talking about for years, even before there was AI, is that there's a lot of work that goes into your firm that doesn't generate revenue. And the more that you can reduce that, so administrative tasks, things of that nature, keeping yourself on budget, which is maybe not as intuitive, but that leads to the revenue that you can actually earn. All of the things that you can do to be more efficient ultimately will improve this number. And we're going to get into more details later on how to break this down. We always like to start with this. I said this, but this is a metric that even if you don't have any kind of software at all, I hope you know how much revenue you made, and I hope you know how many employees you have. That's pretty straightforward. So you can calculate this very easily and figure out where you sit on this curve. And that's why we start there. We will go into more details on how to break this down and actually figure out what this means. But I do think the takeaway here is embracing technology, whatever it is, will drive that. And there's a question in the chat about what warrants using AI. So this is basically, we looked at Monograph customers. All of this is Monograph customers and looking at those that are heavily using AI features and tools.
Yeah, and I think a good question to follow up on that is to clarify this is correlation, right? Not causation. We're not saying that you use AI and then suddenly you're just going to be better. To
Yes,
clarify.
definitely. And that's a theme with all this. What we're trying to do is share with you what we're finding. But again, I think it's definitely not causation. We don't know that, hey, you have a ChatGPT license and therefore you're going to make $41,000 more. But I do think it's fair to say that the folks that are, again, embracing the usage of AI or of technology to cut down on their administrative tasks and to make sure that they're on time and on budget are going to win and are going to be more successful. And so I think there's no question that's true, whether it's correlation or causation.
Got it. Yep. So AI is winding that gap further and faster. And as an A&E firm, you really want to be towards that right side of that chart. And how about, can you speak to also AI adoption rates for this year? How that's different from last year?
Yeah, so this is a an interesting one. I know that I think it's not a surprise. It wouldn't surprise anyone on this call to know that the reputation of this industry is a slow adopting technology one. And so actually when we looked at these numbers, it was pretty surprising. So a year ago, less than 5% of our firms were doing using AI in a meaningful way. And again, that's AI features, spending on AI, et cetera. This year, it skyrocketed to 25 to 30% of our firms are doing that. So that's 5 to 6x in 12 months, and probably the fastest adoption that I've seen in this industry of technology, at least as long as I've been in it. It was actually very interesting to me because, again, this seems to have broken through more so than other types of technology in this industry with this group of folks.
Got it. Yeah, and I think walking through the trade floor at AIA was also telling in terms of what kind of companies and what kind of products were out there. So totally makes sense. All right, let's move on a little bit and go into realization. In the previous two slides, we had revenue per employee, which tells you what your firm is earning. But then that doesn't tell you how much of what you earned you're actually capturing. And so that's where realization rate comes in. And this is one of those important metrics in this report, but also one that's probably least tracked. I'm going to break that down a little bit, what it means. So how we define it here, or how you define it in general, it's fees invoiced divided by fees worked. So where you see the 100% line in red means you build exactly what you planned. So to the right of that, above 100%, means that you captured additional services on top of the original scope, meaning you build more than what you expected. On the flip side of that, on the left, below 100% means that money had leaked, meaning you had completed work, but that never made it onto the invoice. And so what our data shows here is that top AI adopting firms are hitting 115%, right? Top baseline firms in the gray, they're at 107%. So both groups are billing above what they planned, but the spread gets wider for the AI adopters, as you can see. The issue here is at the bottom. So lower performing firms in both cohorts are leaving money on the table. Ashish, tell us, why does this gap exist here?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, there are multiple things that could go into how you get a high realization versus a low, but the most common is that you end up going over budget probably without even knowing it. And then when you go to invoice, you realize that you're over budget and you can't charge for it, right? That's the most common thing that happens. There are other things and maybe some additional work or sometimes other things happen, but generally speaking, that's the issue. And whether using AI or not, that may or may not impact how good you are at ensuring that you are on time and on budget. And so that's, I think, what you're seeing here, where if that's just not something you're good at in general, then it doesn't matter if you use more tools if you're not pushing those tools towards actually ensuring that you're on time and on budget and have that visibility. And so what you're seeing at the top is you, if that is your baseline already, if you are already good at that and you say you're already over 100% in these cases, then the way you can get over 100% is actually just being more efficient, charging for value versus time you spend, things of that nature. And that, again, is where AI or technology can allow you to be even more efficient. Maybe you charge but work a lot less and those kinds of things. And that's why you're seeing most of the gains actually happening for people that are already really good at being on time and on budget. And so the takeaway here for me is let's first start with that, make sure you're good at that. And then on top of that, you can capture even more value afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say this is also the case of correlation, not causation, right? Using AI doesn't automatically make you have high realization rates.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're, like I said, if you're not already good at it, being on time, then this isn't really going to help you. But again, what it can help you with down the track is being more efficient, being able to charge more, work less. And that's how you're getting in the over 100% ranges.
Yep. So, yeah, I guess to summarize, there firms that have high realization, they're able to successfully turn a high percentage of their billable efforts into actual cash. So, I think that's a good segue into our next topic, which is cash flow. So realization tells you how much of that work you're capturing on your invoice, right? So cash flow then tells you how long is it taking to actually see that money, right? And for most firms, I think that gap is where a lot of the quiet stress lives. So we measure this as time to payment. So that's days from invoice to payment received. And here I wanted to highlight the data because it's pretty interesting. So high performing firms here, they get paid in 22 days, as you see on the bottom right, versus low performers, they wait 42 days. That's a 20-day gap per invoice cycle. So to put it concretely, top firms are already paid before the next invoice is going out, right? Versus seems like low performers are carrying two invoices outstanding at the same time. They're essentially floating their clients' project costs out of their own pocket. And yeah, multiply that across all of your active projects and it can be pretty damaging. Ashish, what's behind this gap?
Yeah, yeah. Anyone that's heard me speak in probably any of our webinars will know this is a passion of mine to get this number down. If I were to simplify, this just comes down to friction. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the kind of common practices around getting paid in this industry are antiquated and are slow and and cause a lot of friction. And that's everything from billing only one very rarely during certain milestones when you hit them instead of doing monthly, which is what we recommend. Because again, as you said, then you're floating your clients alone basically for all the work that you've done. To using just modern payment methods, sending out emails with reminders, making sure that it's as easy to pay your bills as it is to pay an Amazon bill. You should use credit cards. You should not pass on fees. These are just basic things that the higher performers do. And I've heard all the feedback, and don't get me wrong, there are some clients that are not going to pay that way. They're a government or they're a very large organization. They require getting paid in a different way or require paying in a different way. I get that. But overall, if you want to get this number down and you want to get your efficiency up, you want to get paid as quickly as possible, you need to follow those kind of very clear steps. Again, invoice regularly, use modern payments, don't pass on fees, use reminders, do all of those things to ensure that you're getting paid very quickly because all of these other steps ahead of this don't matter if you're not getting paid, right? And cash flow is the number one issue, not just in this industry, but for any small business. So I think that's really the kind of the main things that I tend to cover.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, and I've even read somewhere that the average collection period in the A&E sector used to be, or maybe it is, 80 days. Thankfully, that's not reflected in our cohort, but
Yeah,
that is quite a bit. That's almost 3 months. So that's pretty critical, I would say.
yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, luckily, this is all our customers' data, which is already better than the industry average. And those that actually turn on credit cards and don't pass on fees, they're getting paid in 7 to 8 days on average. And that's actually from the time the invoice is sent out to the money being in their bank account. That is very short. And that is what I hope everyone gets to sooner rather than later.
So lots of optimizations that could be done here in for cash flows. So finally, the last metric I wanted to cover is utilization. And this one has a less obvious but really important connection to everything that we've talked about. So utilization is defined as billable hours as a share of the total available hours. And the higher the number, the more your team's time is going towards work that actually gets invoiced. But here's the nuance, right? So we're not just looking at architects and engineers. When we're looking specifically at operations staff, the people who are handling the coordination, the admin side of work, project tracking, the invoicing. Ops staff doesn't bill clients directly, but they do have an outsized impact on the people who do. So when ops is buried in manual work, it does pull your billable staff into that work as well. So here's what we found. So operations staff at AI adopters are utilizing about 10 more billable hours per person per week compared to the baseline that you see in gray. And that's the biggest delta that we see for all the roles, any of the roles that are here in this chart. And we could say here that AI is probably handling the admin and coordination work that's used to consume those hours, which helps to free up their production staff to stay on billable work. Yeah, so Ashish, I thought this chart was great, but where does the time actually come from?
Yeah, I actually thought this was quite interesting. Like you said, just being more efficient and using more technology and reducing admin time helps floats all boats, as you can kind of see with all pretty much every single role here. But what I thought was amazing is on the operations side, and that I think that comes out a lot where, when we talk to a lot of our customers, they have folks that could be doing actual billable work, but they spend so much of their time doing invoicing or staffing or some other kind of managing bills and things of that nature. And so I think like what you've circled here, is the most interesting one, where you have staff that otherwise would have not been contributing to revenue and now they actually can. And again, like just reminding ourselves that ultimately your businesses are service businesses. And so billing time is super important to float all boats here. So if you can actually do that and spend less time on admin, that's amazing. And frankly, I was like, oh, wow, this picture is very stark and very clear that there is a benefit here by embracing technology to cut that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the implication for, I think, firm owners watching this is if you have an ops person that's buried in manual admin, right? It's not a staffing problem. It's really a tooling and process problem. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely solvable here. All right, let's zoom through this next one. So we added seasonality data to this year's report for the first time. I think this is not surprising, but it does, I think seeing it really makes it actually plannable. So that's cool. So we found that May and October are your strongest billing months. And the highest was in May, 14% above annual average, versus March being the weakest at 15% below average. Also, Q1 as a whole runs cold for everybody. So 4 consecutive months below average to start the year. I think the question here is then, can you plan around this or are you getting caught off guard? Ashish, yeah. What separates the firms that manage it well versus those that don't?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because, as you said, this is a pattern that seems to persist across all of our customers. Not, of course, and not everyone follows this exact pattern, but there did seem to be a very similar pattern. And the most obvious reason might be that you often are finishing out the year and you don't have the time or the bandwidth to think ahead to Q1, and so you're starting from behind. And frankly, we don't know for sure if that's it. With a lot of this, as we've talked about a few times, there's correlation, causation. So that's a little bit of an educated guess and based on a lot of what we see ourselves. What I think you can do, and especially if you're aware of this and you can look at your own data and see does this resonate, is thinking about planning ahead and filling up your pipeline so that you have a more even spread. Hopefully it's relatively obvious, but just like with the cash flow stuff, the best thing you could do is have a very consistent billing cycle or very little seasonality. Every month, you're hopefully ideally earning about the same, or it's increasing over time as you grow. But you're not seeing these kind of dips and increases from month to month because that's hard to plan for. Most of your people are probably on salaries and that's not how you're paying them. You would ideally like your revenue to be coming in the same way. And so the biggest takeaway here, I think, is just being aware, trying to look forward as far as possible, trying to make sure you have a pipeline that's strong and that you can plan for so that you don't run into a situation where you're starting off the year effectively making a lot less and still having to pay the same amount out.
Yep, great points. Great. Yeah, so let's kind of conclude this here. And So now you've seen what good looks like in our benchmarks. And I would say the main takeaway here from our data is that top firms aren't doing anything exotic, right? But they are pretty disciplined in what they do. They know their numbers, right? They know their revenue per employee, their realization rate, their utilization, and they do track them consistently. They also catch scope creep before the invoice, not after. They also get paid faster because they have their process set up right. Their operations staff runs lean, so their architects and engineers can stay focused on the billable work. And they treat Q1 as the planning problem that they solved, not a scramble or a surprise that they have to deal with every year. And yeah, so again, I think the common thread here is visibility, that they're not flying blind. And it's also something that you can easily do as well. Yeah, so with everything that we've been talking about, none of it's going to happen without the right infrastructure underneath it. But we do know that many firms are stitching this together with spreadsheets and separate billing tools and end of the month reports. Got to plug Monograph a little bit, but yeah, so at Monograph, we can connect all of it in one place. So you do have that visibility that you need to make these decisions in real time and not after the fact. Going to throw it to Ashish. Tell us a little bit about our platform.
Yeah, yeah. As you said, I ultimately just again, whole intent of today is to help you see where you can stack up against others. And hopefully, if it's hard for you right now to figure that out because you maybe have disconnected systems or no system at all, I think what Monograph can provide you, if you're not already on it, is that one place. We believe very strongly in running your entire firm and having everything connected. You do something in one spot, you log some time, and then you instantly know where your budget's at and what your profitability is and that kind of thing. So we focus a lot of energy on doing that. For those of you that are customers, hopefully it's easy for you to compare yourself to the numbers in these benchmarks. We alluded to it earlier, but even some of these benchmarks are better than the industry average because we actually already have customers that are using our tools and are getting better results. We are built for A&E. We were and are. We have a lot of folks in our firms that have been in this space either previously or even currently and rely on a lot of you to help us figure out the best ways. And we think about things from a first principles standpoint, meaning we're not always just, I think we alluded to it a few times, we're not always doing things the way they have been done. And sometimes that requires a little bit of change on our customers' part, but hopefully the trade-off is that or the benefit that they get out of that is the success that you can see. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I think we covered it already, but we have a lot of data that is available. Yeah, some of our customers will say that there's more that we could do, and that's definitely true. But I think what we hope to do, and that's this last point, is we also try to keep things simple. Like in my mind, the perfect world would be you actually you get on Monograph and then you never go back to Monograph again and you just wait till we tell you something's wrong. We're not quite there yet, but we are getting to a place where we want to help you run your firm so you can spend most of your time doing the stuff you love, the actual design work, the client work, the problem solving, all of that kind of stuff versus spending a bunch of time trying to figure out how to optimize your business. That is something that we hope to achieve on your behalf. And so, yeah, that's why I think we're the best tool out there for that. And we're continuing to get a lot better. And seeing this data helps us figure out where to focus, just like it hopefully will do for you.
Great. And any comments for anyone curious on where we're headed for on I specifically?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think we have, I don't know, for those customers on here, you may have seen we just launched a tool on our dashboard where you can ask. I referenced how oftentimes people ask about data that maybe isn't in a report or isn't very easy to find. Now we have an open question box that you've probably seen in other tools as well. It's working pretty well. Again, I would just reiterate, obviously AI is frankly an overused term. I think that just lines up for us with the general thing that we've been saying for years, which is technology can help you cut down on tasks that are low value and aren't things that you either love or are generating you revenue. That's what we're doing. That's what we're focused on. We are constantly looking at that. Now, whether we're using AI or not is almost irrelevant, but automation of more tools, batch invoicing, automation, I think as of very recently, as in a few hours ago, we just launched an AR assistant that can help follow up for those that aren't getting those quick payments on invoices, a tool to help you with that. So we're always thinking about how to optimize all these numbers that we've just talked about, but hopefully in a way that you don't really have to think about it too much and we can just help you get it done.
Yeah, super exciting stuff. All right. Before we head into Q&A, so anything we covered today made you rethink how your firm should be performing? Do come talk to us, right? So book a demo at monograph.com. And again, yeah, let's get into your questions. Please use the Q&A widget that you see in your console. If you don't find it, you can click on the More button at the far right and start asking questions that you have. Awesome. So let me pull up the box here. All right, Ashish, question for you. We're not AI adopters yet. Is it too late to close the gap?
Oh, no, definitely not. I think any of us in the space now always feel like we're behind. The great news is there's always improvements, iterations that are happening, and things just keep getting easier and more effective. I would just say to get in there, use the same skills that you use in your business, problem solving, curiosity, et cetera, and try things out. Of course, if you're on Monograph, there should be tools that will allow you to just do all that without having to hopefully learn too much. But even outside of that, I would just encourage you to tinker and see what could work for you.
Yeah, great answer. Another question. This one's around firm size. Does firm size matter here? We're a small firm. Do these benchmarks still apply to us?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We actually, in previous years, I think we separated it out by different sizes, and we found that actually there's not much of a difference. That's why, for example, our kind of headline number, revenue per FTE, effectively scales for the size of team. Yeah, I would encourage you to, whether you're very large or very small, a lot of these metrics are going to still be good guideposts. I did say, and I think it is true, that if you're doing certain types of work, maybe time to payment and things like that, if you're getting paid by a government organization and things like that, there are real reasons why you might have some differences, but overall, firm size doesn't make a big difference.
Great. Here, next question. If you had to pick only three KPIs to run a firm, which three would they be?
Yeah. So top one, as I said, would be revenue per employee. I like that one for a variety of reasons. One is it's super simple. It kind of diagnoses a bunch of things together, which I'll get into with the other KPIs. And like I said, it scales with the size of your business and it's easy to calculate. You don't need any tools or whatever. Again, hopefully you know your revenue, you know your number of employees. And then below that, I would go with realization. And again, because the number one thing I see is that people end up doing work that they can't charge for. And that's what realization rate tells you. Are you doing more or less work than what you're actually getting paid? And again, being on time and on budget is the main thing. So, and that captures that. And then the last I'd say is cash flow, speed to payment, because again, none of this even matters if you're not getting paid quickly. You shouldn't be giving people loans. That's not your business. You should be getting paid for the work you do, and you should be getting paid very quickly. So those would be the three that I would pick.
Great. Let's see. Maybe to follow up on that. So we struggle to get paid on time. Is that a client problem or an internal problem?
Look, of course, everyone has to diagnose. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what specifically is going wrong. That being said, the things that I generally see are not having clear invoices, not sending them often enough. So there's kind of two things about sending them often, right? One is obviously you get paid more often and it reduces your kind of how long you're lending people money. But the other thing it does is it lowers the amount, right? The more often you send them, the smaller those bills are going to be, and the sticker shock and the vetting on whether I should be paying this and are you sure this is the right number and all that reduces because the size of the bill reduces as well. So there's the speed, there's the clarity, and again, making it really easy to pay. It should be as easy to pay that as any other online service. There's nothing special about this. Again, I'm caveating that with there are clients that have very specific requirements on how to pay. And in those cases, ideally, you try to figure out ways to do those things. But in general, those other pain points are the reason.
Great answer. Okay, maybe the last one here. What kind of AI are you actually advocating using for firms? AI is pretty generic. So it doesn't
Yep.
feel valuable to say, just use AI. It's not going to tell us.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I cannot sit here and tell you that I know very much about the craft of architecture engineering. This entire discussion was not about that. It was about helping you run your business more effectively and doing administrative tasks. So, examples that come to mind, and I'm not going to plug Monograph, but creating your proposals, for example. It's a lot of work to on answering RFPs. Like it's a lot of work to figure out what needs to go into that. A lot of it might be repetitive, but some parts of it are very unique. It's not as trivial as just copying and pasting. And so that those types of things are what AI is very good at. Scanning documents and getting important information out of them. So an example from Monograph is scanning your contracts and then using that to develop or to very easily enter your budgets into Monograph. Like those types of things can save you a bunch of time. So it's mostly that kind of thing that we're talking about here to cut down on administrative tasks. Again, I'm not an expert by any means on how you should be using it in your craft itself, and there likely are good uses for it there, but that's not my purview.
Got it. Okay, final question. And I think this is good too. So our firm has a dedicated controller. We call it studio manager. So they are overhead. They don't do any production besides monograph management and office coordination. Is that common in other firms?
Yeah, I think that is very common. I think this data suggests that some high performing firms have found ways to leverage that same resource to do billable work as well. Whether that is because that person actually had that background and can do that, and you found other ways, or they were able to find a different method. I'm not sure, but it is very common, just to be clear, to have, you might call it an admin, you might call it a studio controller or a studio manager or a controller or a bookkeeper, those kinds of things. What we hope is that, and again, no one here, by the way, is suggesting labor replacement or not having those people, but it's just more about can you get that person to be a lot more efficient? Can you maybe you have that dedicated person and it takes away the administrative tasks from your project managers or your principals or whatever. It's not necessarily about getting rid of roles, but more about being super, super efficient in those admin type roles.
Perfect. Okay, I think we're at time. Thank you again, Ashish, for walking us through this data, and thank
Yeah.
you to everybody for joining. And again, if anything that we covered today sparked a question around your own firm's performance, we'd love to continue that conversation. Please book a demo with us at monograph.com. Also, as you probably saw, you can respond to the poll that's launching, and we'll have somebody get in touch with you if you're interested in booking a demo. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, everyone. And yeah, see you next time.
Thanks, Aya, and thanks everyone for joining.
Okay.